Right, it's the 22nd of March 2016 and this is Brian Thompson and I'm talking with Gordon Adams. Thank you for agreeing to take part in our recorded interview about your work experiences. Locals refer to the place where you worked as the brush factory. Can you tell me about its proper name?
Well, it was actually known as Wisdom, and also that was the brand name of the toothbrushes that we produced, but it was also Addis. It was owned by Addis, and the company name was Addis. The Wisdom is the logo of the toothbrushes, which incidentally the original Addis started manufacturing toothbrushes as we know it today. He was the one that invented the toothbrush. And that goes back to 1780, I think it was. And we had a bicentenary for that a few years ago.
I mean, that's a fair way back. Can you remember when the Addis factory actually started off in Haverhill?
I think it was in 1946. It started up just after the war. At that time, there was a company here, I believe, that was called Suffolk Brush Company. Now, what I understand was that the company director, one of the company directors of Addis, who were at that time based at Hartford, he was a technical director and he had relations who lived in Haverhill, and he approached, when he heard that the factory was for sale, he told Mr. Addis, and so they purchased the property and it started from there. That was John J.D. Lilly, his name was, and I think Mr. Cliff, Reg Cliff, was engaged about that time. Some say he knew Mr. Lilly. I'm not sure about that, but that anyway, he started up at that time, 1946, I believe. It was certainly ongoing by 1948 in production, all solely on toothbrushes at that time. Yes.
Just talking about your own personal job at Addis, when did you start working for the company?
I started in January 1958, and I was engaged as the assistant works manager at the time, and my job at that time would entailed production planning, because I'd done a similar job in my previous works where I was a production manager.
Just a general question, how long did you work there for?
I worked there until 1991, and I retired early at that stage. Yes, so that's 33 years now.
Yes. It's a long
yes.
time for one company.
Yes.
How did you get your job? Was it advertised, or was you headhunted, or?
Well, it was funny actually, because I lived in Hertfordshire at the time, and I applied for a job that was advertised in the Hertfordshire Mercury for a job at Hertford. But when I was interviewed, I was passed on to Mr. Addis to be interviewed, and he said that he thought that I would be better employed in Haverhill, where they were looking for an assistant works manager at the time. So I took the job on and moved down here.
Right, okay. And sorry, did you tell me how old you was when you moved down here?
I was 24. I think I was, yes.
And did you have a
Yes,
family
24.
when you moved down here? Or?
No,
No.
I was just married, that was all, yes,
Right,
no
okay.
family, yes.
So that was
Yes.
quite a move then, just
Oh,
getting
yes,
married
yes,
to come to
yes.
Haverhill.
Yes, and then I moved, then after about 6 years, Mr. Cliff, his wife was suffering from some problem that meant that she needed to have a warmer climate. So Mr. Addis arranged for Mr. Cliff to be transferred to one of our South African companies. We had two factories in South Africa, and he was transferred to one of those. So I was then appointed as the works manager. So I was made works manager when I was just 30.
Right, so it's quite young.
Was really,
then.
yes. And that was with the factory at that time was nearly 500 people employed there. Yes.
You mentioned your management role. I was just about to ask, what were your job titles? Because I believe you had more than just one job role.
Yes, I had the assistant works manager role, the works manager's role, and then in the early 80s I was asked to take on the role of industrial relations manager and then later director, because at that stage there was a lot of legislation going on with employment legislation, and I took the role on eventually as director of industrial relations and personnel, which covered the whole company, but I still retained my job as works manager at Haverhill. And then later on I took on the role of works manager at Hertford as well, and then so I was moving between the two factories. After that I was taken on as the manufacturing director, so then I shed my role as works manager and still retained my industrial relations role. That was in about 1986, I think it was, that time. So then I took on the role which covered the whole company. The company at that stage employed about just under 2,000 people.
I'm surprised you had any home life at all, taking on so many different roles at one time.
It was a busy life, and it particularly busy because I introduced 3 shift. First of all, an evening shift for the part of the factory that wasn't on shift work. Moulding shop was on 3 shift system and had been ever since I employed here, but I introduced an evening shift so that we employed past employees who had worked with us, but we set up filling section and packing section, examining section on an evening shift basis as well as a day shift, and that went on for a time. So I did go in to see people in the evenings as well, not just in the day. And then later on, I think I must have been one of the first people to put females on 3-shift system, which we introduced, and we had quite a big response for that, working on 3 shifts throughout 24 hours. I think I probably was one of the first in East Anglia to do so.
Why do you think there was a big response for that? Were they young women with young families?
Yes, and it suited a lot of people. I think the favoured shift was either 6 till 2 or 2 till 10, because it was in the daytime, but there was still a fair response for the evening shift as well. So in the end we just rotated, and if people wanted to retain on one shift and they could get somebody to swap with them, then they would swap, and we did it that way.
Yes,
So
I suppose.
very well.
Yeah, I suppose it's very convenient for young families who are really trying to get 2 incomes, where the husband's probably during the daytime and the wives would go and work in the evening time.
That's right. It was very, very convenient, and so that worked very well. And the reason we introduced it was because we had some very expensive machinery, and it was just laying dormant for half the day. So by utilising that, we were able to increase our productivity with the new machinery we had, and it also helped to reduce the capitalisation. We didn't need to buy so many machines. We could produce with the machines we got.
Yeah, that's
So-
interesting. Just getting back to your sites that you had, I knew you had a site in Haverhill in Hertford, and you mentioned there were 5 sites. Where were
Yes,
these based?
it sort of varied according to the number of years. In my early days, we had there was Hertford was the head office, Haverhill making toothbrushes. There was a factory in Swansea making wooden brushes, which is actually Forest Far. And we then purchased a factory in Woodbridge that made Colmac shaving brushes. That was a smallish factory. But then we also set up a factory, a very large factory in Swansea, making the housewares, because we introduced housewares at that stage into the part of the company, and making buckets, bowls, large brushes and the rest of it. So at that stage we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 factories. We then later on set up a factory in Thornaby-on-Tees, and that was because we predicted, the sales department predicted, that we would make a lot of hairbrushes and we needed another factory. So I helped to set up the factory in Thornaby-on-Tees, which went very well for a time, but unfortunately the amount of volume of sales didn't warrant an extra factory, so we unfortunately had to close it. So that was about the position at the time, the number of factories that we had, until much later on, when we rationalised a lot of our activities. I arranged for us to close the moulding shop in Hertford so that we could consolidate a lot of machinery in Haverhill, so that we would carry on moulding in the one side of the business all in one place, and the other side of the business, which was housewares, was produced in the Swansea factory, except they were larger products. So yes,
So why did you have to close down some of these places? Was it because of competitors or just a lack of sales?
no, the sales we were okay on. We continued to produce large volumes of sales, and we were increasing. I think at one stage the factory in Haverhill was producing nearly 2/3 of all the toothbrushes sold in this country, so it was pretty large. But we were able, with improved machinery, we were able to increase our volumes, and so we didn't need, there was no need to have quite so many factories working under those circumstances. We still retained the factory at Hertford, but we did close the moulding shop down and still retained other parts of the business.
And did you export abroad?
Oh yes, we had quite a large export, but we also had several factories abroad as well. We had not large factories, but we had factories in Jamaica, 2 in South Africa, 2 in Australia, and we set up it wasn't a factory as such in Ceylon, but it was a shared factory there, and also one in India. So we had quite a large number of places that were producing for the old Commonwealth countries, as well as exporting ourselves. Yes.
Cool. And just getting back to your particular job, and most of the time you spent in management. Did you get any specific training for this, or did it sort of just come natural to
I did
you?
take on a diploma course in management in my earlier days, in the early 60s actually. It was a 3-year course, and when I had a diploma in management studies at the end of it. But other than that, it was just.
And did you do that off your own back, or was you sponsored to do that?
Well, the company sort of agreed for me to go and to have a day off a week to go and sort that out. Yes, and I did go on a number of seminars at different places in the country, you know, to improve the knowledge on that. Because it wasn't just management of the factories, but it was also all the new legislation that was coming through from the government, industrial relations legislation, health and safety legislation, and training legislation. All of those things were being processed at the time, and that was my responsibility to analyse them and set up the company's policies on each of those areas. So it was quite a...
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, you've got quite a responsible job there and a lot of responsibility. Did you find your job difficult? I mean, what particular skills would you need to do this job, to do these jobs?
I think as far as HR was concerned, I think you needed to have an empathy with people. You needed to understand the problems, and I think you needed to have a sympathy for some of the legislation that went in. For instance, there was the Industrial Relations Act that set up for people, employees, to have rights on their employment, that they had a right to retain their employment so long as there wasn't a very good reason for them to be dismissed. And I always believed that to be the case, that I think that it was right and proper that you shouldn't be just dismissed willy-nilly without any reason, because that was the way things were prior to the acts coming in. And I also belonged to the Manufacturing Association, so I'd forgotten to mention that I became the chairman of the negotiating committee for the trade as well. So I had that, and I can remember giving a talk on it to the members, and how infuriated they were to think that the government were giving away to the employees their employment rights. And I had to have a fairly intensive argument over that, to point out that, well, so long as you do your job right and you warn people if they're doing things wrong, and if they don't respond, then you go to the next stage, and then you can... It isn't a case that you can't dismiss people, but you should do it in the right way. So that was an amusing little time.
Yeah.
Yes.
If we can just go on to your workplace now, Gordon.
Yes.
And there were several departments. Can you just describe the Addis brush factory in Haverhill? And
yes. Well, we had a moulding shop first. I mean, you've got to start with a moulding shop. And supporting the moulding shop, we had a tool room. So the tool room actually made the moulds for the moulding shop. It was a very good tool room, and we had got a number of apprentices every year that we took on, and they all became very good engineers. So the moulding shop was working 3 shifts, because you don't want to stop moulding machines if you can help it. It's best to keep them going. That supplied the toothbrush handles, and later on other handles to do the job. They were then passed on to the next stage, which was the filling shop, where the nylon filament, and at one stage it used to be the bristle filament, would be injected into the holes. The original filling machines drilled the holes and then passed it on, and they were then filled with the filaments. And there's a small anchor, metal anchor, that was cropped off and wedged in to hold the filaments in place. That was the filling shop. The next shop it went to was the serrating shop, where the ends were trimmed to make them nice and flat or shaped according to the product that we were making. And then they were passed on from there to the examining section, where every brush was inspected for quality before it went further into and passed on to the packing section. And the packing section then cartoned them or did what was necessary, blister sealed them or whatever they had to be done, and passed on to the stores area, where the warehouse area. Actually, we didn't have a warehouse. All the goods were then transported to Harford, which had the warehouse. So they were the areas that we worked, and of course we had an office to back that up. And I failed to mention that in the early stages, when the handlers were moulded, they were moulded on stalks, and so we had to pass them through to a department which was the polishing, and they cut off the stalks and cut the handles off the stalks, and then polished the ends so that they were nice and smooth before they were processed there. Later on, we moulded them without the stalks, and later on we also moulded them with the holes already in, didn't need to be drilled by the machines.
Okay.
So
yeah, I mean, that's quite interesting. When you pick up a toothbrush, you don't appreciate, I don't think, what it takes to go from the raw product to the final piece of merchandise.
That's true.
It's quite interesting.
One other thing that we introduced after serrating was round ending. It was felt that by cropping off the nylon filaments, they were still harsh and still rather sharp. So we went through another process, which was sort of to round end all of the filaments by passing them over sort of grinding wheels, and that, so that they were buffed down or buffing.
That's good.
So that's that.
You mentioned there's quite a few people that worked for the company in its heyday. Was it mostly men, or were there women involved? You did say there was a shift for
yes,
women introduced.
It was I think it was about 50-50 actually. The men always worked in the engineering departments. We had the tool room, and we also had engineering departments that supported the other processes, where they were fitters doing the jobs. They were all men, as were all the moulders, because they worked 3-shift system, and it was considered that was a man's job at the time. The females all worked in the other processes, which were filling, serrating, examining and packing.
Yeah, it was interesting that you said that's considered to be a man's job as opposed to a woman's job. But I think times have changed now. But I mean, was that really the case then? Was it because there were no young girls coming through in apprenticeships who wanted to be on the engineering side, or were they just steered into another direction?
At that stage, it wasn't recognised that women would do other jobs other than that. But the reason that the women were employed on the jobs they were was because they were more dexterous, really. I think the reason that the men all worked in the moulding shop was because I think it was considered at the time that it was a man's job to do shifts and to work through the night as well as the day. And I changed that when the Equal Pay Act came into effect, and eventually encouraged women to take part in the moulding shop as well, and we also had men working on filling machines and the packing area. But it took a while, and it was very gradual, but we did eventually get around to doing it, and of course eventually we introduced a 3-shift system for women as well.
I can imagine that women were quite pleased to have an opportunity to do other jobs. But how did the men feel at that time when they saw the women coming in on equal pay? Did they feel threatened, or?
I never had any. I didn't notice any feeling of that it wasn't correct to do it. I think because we'd already introduced women onto three-shift system on the processes that they were engaged on, I think that the men could see that they could equally do the job in the moulding shop, and so that was accepted. And the fact that we'd already introduced men working on filling machines and the like, it seemed to work both ways. Yes, so I was very lucky that we didn't have a lot of feelings about that.
I mean, considering the product that you was producing, was it a clean environment?
Yes, it was a clean environment. Yes, and we introduced in some areas where women would wear the hats to keep their hair in place. So yes.
And what facilities did you have down in Haverhill? Did you have canteens?
Yes. From the time I started, we had a canteen in the what was then the old silk mill at the top floor, and that catered for anyone that wished to have a meal. And that was one facility. Or another facility that we had, it was a non-smoking industry. We were not allowed to smoke at anywhere on the premises, except we had a smoking hut that was in the middle of the yard, and the moulders, because they were on shift, were allowed to have shift breaks, have breaks, to smoke breaks, and so that continued actually, to my knowledge, from that time, but always in a separate area for smoking.
Oh, right, okay.
Yes.
We can just go on to working conditions now. I mean, I was going to ask what hours did you work, but I suspect you worked more than a normal 40 hours a week.
Well, I did, yes, I did, yes. I worked whatever hours were necessary, really. I mean, I always tried to be there, well, I always was there by 8 o'clock in the morning, and I worked through, and then I would go back nights when we had shift work at times, so go through and see everybody. And of course, when I had the other jobs, when I was working for the company overall, I suppose my hours were varied quite considerably.
Yeah.
But
can you remember how much you got paid when you first started?
Gosh.
I know that's a difficult question.
Yeah, I think I was paid somewhere about. It was somewhere between £7 and £10 a week, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was about that anyway. Yes, somewhere between that.
Yeah. And was there a company pension?
Yes, we had a company. We were one of the forerunners, I believe, in company pensions, and it was a final salary scheme, very good scheme. So that was apparently set up very early on. Mr. Addis was a believer in good employee relations and dealing with that, and in fact he also had a profit sharing scheme in a way, in the sense that if he would determine it, but every year, at least once a year, we would have a profit bonus declared, when everyone would receive whatever was declared. In other words, it might be 4 weeks' pay, 6 weeks' pay, and I think I can remember once when it was 8 weeks' pay, and that was just paid. It didn't matter who you were, you all had the same. You had different payments because you had different salaries, but everyone was paid
the same percentage.
The same percentage, yes.
Wow.
Yes.
I mean, it strikes me, I mean, speaking to other people that come from Addis, it seemed a really happy place to work, and I can understand now why from what you're saying. I mean, how many holidays did you have a year, days holiday did you have a year?
Well, when I first started, I think it was 2 weeks a year, but when I left, it was about 4 weeks a year.
And did it increase on length of service or on the promotion, perhaps?
It was not on promotion. Everybody in the company received the same amount of holidays, but I think it was about 4 weeks when I left, and irrespective of who you were and what you were. Yes.
Just thinking about health and safety, and you did touch on it earlier, how did that change work practices over the years?
I think it didn't change us too much, because we were always conscious of factory inspectors coming round whenever there was a problem, and so it more or less changed on process, on the control, than on the actual working. I mean, we had safety devices on the machines, and they were there irrespective, but we did have to lay down procedures and safeguards to make sure that people didn't do something foolish. So from that point of view, yes, we had to lay down procedures, and quite a lot of work went into that, you know, to process the policy, really. Yes.
I'd just like to talk about the benefits of working at Addis, and I said earlier, speaking to other employees of Addis, that they all seem to have enjoyed working there, almost saying that it was a family, and worked there for many years, a lot of them.
Yes, it was, and in fact we had mothers, children coming along who also joined the company. There were quite a lot of people who had, you know, relations and other people working in the company. A lot of people married within the company as well, which was nice. Yes, we did have there was a lot of family there involved. Yes.
And I suspect what did help was that it appears that you may have had an active sports and social
Yes, we did.
side.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. I was involved in that as well. I was a secretary for a time.
Oh, was you?
And
Okay.
yes, the secretary of the Sports and Social Club. And we used to play cricket. We did play football. I didn't play football. I played cricket, but I didn't play football. But we did have a football team, cricket team, and also we did have other activities. We had children's parties. So we had a premise, some premises in Dudley Hill, just opposite the factory. There was a house there, a big old house. Yeah. And we used that as a sports and social club, and people could go in there and play card games and things like that. But we'd have the children's party in there once or twice a year. We also had dinner dances we arranged. I remember once going over to Chilford Hall there and having a sort of Christmas do there.
Yeah.
So we had that. Addis also, as a company, had the 25-year club. Anyone that had been there over 25 years had got to watch, and they sort of were invited along to the Addis dues that they held, dinners and that. So we did have quite a lot of activity going on there.
I mean, and did you think it was important from the company's point of view to have a good sports and social club? I mean, did it instill good feeling within the employees?
Yes, I think
the
it
workforce?
did. I think there's a camaraderie there that, you know, that helped to generate. I think that was good, actually, and well, I think there were quite a lot of things that went on that I didn't always take part in, you know, that which everybody was getting on with. Yes.
So the sports and social club was backed in essence from
Yes.
the management.
Yes, it was.
Addis.
Yes. Oh, yes, definitely.
It's probably why there were so many marriages come from it.
Probably,
because of the
yes.
social side. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, you mentioned about the 25-year club. Is this the same as the long service awards?
Yeah, it is what it is, actually.
Yeah.
It's the long service. 25 years was the recognised period.
Right.
And so Yes, it was 25 years.
So what would you have got if you worked for
well,
Addis for 25
you could choose.
years?
You could choose. You could have a gold watch, or you could have anything that you were given a certain amount of money that you could purchase. So you could have a clock if you wanted, or anything of that nature.
And you'd have special presentation nights for these?
Yes. There would always be a presentation. Either Mr. Addis Senior or his son would conduct the occasion. Yes, they would. You would actually be invited up to head office, which was Hartford. They'd probably have an area there, and we would go there, and all the 25-year club people would be there as well, and would welcome in the new 25-year people, and they would be awarded it. Yes.
Oh, that's a nice idea.
Yes.
Yeah. And I suspect there were quite a few 25-year members.
Yes, there were. Yes.
Which is good for the company, the fact that so many people stayed for a long period of time.
Oh yes. Well, I think the company generally was proud of the fact that we had so many 25-year people. Yes. And one other thing that I just remembered is that I did introduce another get-together, which was for people who had retired and left Haverhill, left the works. We started to invite them back to come and have a drink with us and in the canteen, and a get-together, and to walk around the factory and to see their old comrades around the factory.
Yeah, that's good.
And that worked very well actually. It was a lot of good feeling over that. Yes.
And since the company is now no longer in Haverhill, are there any other sort of get-togethers or reunions as such?
I don't know. I because the fact that the company now is completely gone.
Yeah.
Parts of the products are still sold with their logos, but they are no longer owned by Addis, and they're no longer anything to do with Addis. There is a Wisdom company on the estate. I've never been there. I don't really know anything about it actually. Yes.
I was going to ask whether you're a member of a trade, was a member of a trade union at any time, and were there any disputes at all?
No, I can genuinely say we never had any disputes in Haverhill. I think we only had one small dispute in Swansea, and that was a very small dispute and didn't last. And no, we didn't have any really. I mean, we negotiated with several trade unions throughout the company. Addis at Haverhill, we had 2 trade unions we negotiated with. And fortunately we had a very good relationship, and everything worked all right really. Yes.
There must have been some comfort being someone in head of HR to know that you didn't have any disputes.
Well, yes.
Can you remember the unions that were involved in Addis?
Yes. Originally it was the Brushmakers Union.
Okay.
And that was the oldest union in the country at the time. It's since become defunct because it was taken over by FTAT, which is Furniture and Timber Allied Trades. It was taken over by them, and in fact the trade, the brush trade, we still negotiated with FTAT, and as I said earlier on, I was the chief negotiator for the trade. FTAT continued at Haverhill, but the TGWU was the one that mainly dominated at Haverhill.
Okay.
Yes.
I know you mentioned earlier that you retired quite a bit before the actual Addis factory in Haverhill closed.
Yes.
But did you see any movement towards automation in the work process? And if you did, what effect did this have on the workforce?
Oh yes, we gradually did automate. I mean, we had moulding shops that were automatically operated. They operated on their own. We just set up machines, and they would then just produce, and so long as they were fed with granules, plastic granules, they would just churn out work. So there was a lot of changes. There were a lot of changes there, where instead of one operator looking after one machine, it became one operator looking after one machine, 3 machines, or maybe more, according to the size of the machines. In some cases, I think we had a batch of about 8 or 10 smaller machines, and one operator would look after all the lot. So we had less operatives working in that sense. As far as the other part of the business is concerned, yes, there was a toothbrush filling became filling and trimming involved all in one. I introduced at one stage, I visited the States and came back with some ideas that they had, which was that we would have a tray, and that each tray would take a number of toothbrushes, and so the toothbrush machine would place a finished toothbrush in the tray. So you had a tray of, I forget how many it was now, I think it must have been about a dozen brushes, or maybe more, 20 brushes. And so an inspector could look at the whole lot in one go. So by doing all these things, we reduced considerably the number of operatives working on filling. Serrating was incorporated, so it no longer became a separate department, and round ending was also involved in that. Examining, because of the way we did it, was reduced. Packaging, instead of, when I first started, packing operatives would have individual cartons and would be fitting one brush into a carton and finishing it off and passing it on and then putting them in a dozen in a pack and so on. We then purchased cartoning machines, so they just produced cartons, brushes with cartons and straight through to the machines, and the same with blister packing machines. So gradually we did change it quite considerably.
I suppose this obviously had an effect on the workforce. Was that due to natural wastage that you reduced numbers, or did you have to enforce redundancies? Or?
We have had to make redundancies, but very seldom and very few. Mainly we did it by natural wastage, and I mean because the process evolved all the time, we didn't have a sudden impact. It was new machines were introduced gradually, so we were able to accommodate with natural wastage. And I think when I left, I think the workforce was down to about 220, 240 people. But we were producing more, and we were producing more goods as well.
I meant to ask earlier, did you have any home workers?
Home workers? No. We did just a few. We did at one stage, but only just as a very
so
short.
It wasn't commonplace as such.
No.
I know you left before Addis actually closed, the factory, but I don't know if you ever kept in touch with people. How did the employees felt when the company closed? Did you?
No, I don't know. I mean, I think they were sad about it. I'm sure they were. But no, I didn't really. I did keep. I haven't, what I say, personally kept in touch with people. I bump into people in the street, and we talk then. The only people I kept in touch with in a more formal way was my colleagues, directors of the company. I mean, I kept in touch with the technical director, who I was a friend of, so he covered the same as I did, various all the factories. So I kept in touch with him, and I kept in touch with the sales and marketing director as well. But they were the only ones that I kept in touch with formally. But informally, I mean, I love to meet people and in the street.
Well, you seem to have worked there for many years, and you seem from what you're saying, you seem to have enjoyed working there.
Yes.
I really would like to thank you for coming here today
Yes.
to speak to us. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very
Okay.
much.